So that's stakes, obstacle, and through line. What's the very next thing that happens when you say, he's the love of my life and I cannot live without him? Without him, I don't have love. The obstacle is he doesn't love me. The overall through line is to get him to love me. Now he's in front of me. Can I tell him what I'm thinking? Yes or no? No. Why? Because I'll scare him away. So I can't tell him what I'm thinking. I have to get him to see what I'm thinking. Oh, here comes the overall through line. I have to get him to see what I'm thinking. Well, I can't tell him what I'm thinking. That becomes an obstacle, what I'm thinking. So I have to cover what I'm thinking and get him to see that I like him, but not too much if that scares him. Get him to see that I like him so that he'll stay. So all the things that I'm thinking that I want to say that I can't say become the subtext. If you can say it, guess what? The stakes aren't high enough. I really don't care if you like me or not. What if I want to marry him? I couldn't say that because what if he went away and never came back? Just say, ew! Do you see how full of nothing I am? Well, I'm actually full of shit. I'm full of the negative thinking of what I think he's thinking that he might be thinking that he may not like me if he's thinking. And that's what he's seeing me do while I think my smiling is hiding all that. Find me. Do you understand? So subtext is the natural next little train that hooks up to the track when the stakes, obstacle, and through line are in place and in motion. That subtext that comes up that can't be spoken causes me to say what I'm saying, not because I memorized something so the director will like me. Causation causes me to cover what I mean while I say what the writer wrote that I don't want to say, but I have to say because the writer wrote it in order to get him to see that I love him, but not really. That I like him, but not that much. That I want him, but I could not if he doesn't want to. That I need him, but not if he doesn't. Do you understand all the manipulation that goes on? You don't have to act any of this. It's all right here for the taking. I don't know why our communities don't know this yet, but it's time they start knowing it. Now, if I have stakes, obstacle, through line, and subtext is organically coming up, but I can't get any of it to actually come into formation, something's off with my substitution. Substitution is that with which causes a visceral response directly related to the stakes I just set up. So if I say he's the love of my life and I cannot live without him, the obstacle is he doesn't love me back. The overall through line is to get him to love me. The subtext is starting to come up of how much I love him, but he doesn't love me back. But none of it is really finite. None of it is taking it off the page and actually standing me up in it. Then I need to look at the substitution of who I'm using. If I'm using an old boyfriend that I really don't care about anymore, then I don't care about him. I'm sure he's a fine guy and married to someone else or having a great life or whatever, but he doesn't do it for me. I've got to find the substitution of someone who really, that I really, really love, that I really want to be with. If I'm happily married to a man and I can't use that because I'm not having an affair and I'm happily married to my husband. He's not going anywhere, so I can't use my husband because I already know he's not going anywhere. So it won't bring it up. I have to find someone that I fear the loss of. In my world today, and since we've been using it for the last 3 days, I would say my grandson. That somehow, somewhere, I substitute in over there because he is the love of my life. And the obstacle is that I get to see him when his parents tell me I can see him and not until. The overall through line is to get him to play with me, get him to need me. I can't wait till he gets old enough to buy him a phone. The first thing he's getting when he turns first grade, Grandma's buying him a phone, and my number's going to be on speed dial. Grandma, will you come get me? Ask Daddy if it's okay. Daddy, can Grandma come get me? Sure, but she's gotten you every day this week. I want to go, please. Okay, I'm in. I didn't even have to ask. I just manipulated the whole thing. Remember, this is cult we're bringing up. So I substitute in that man or that grandson or whoever it is that I can't live without. Now I start thinking about what he thinks I'm thinking. Now, my grandson's not going to work in this case because my grandson's 2, he doesn't think. So I can't use him. But I could use him as the distinction of the opportunity of loss. not to have him just makes me dizzy. So I would substitute in some unrequited love, someone somewhere that I didn't get to finish it out with. And even as I say it, my very first love when I was 17, and I still know him today, and it was still unrequited. And if I run into him today, he's a fine man who I really enjoy, but I have no interest in him anymore. But if I remember myself back at 19, 20, 21, and I have the ability to do that, and you will too as you begin to practice this work, he is right there in front of me, and if I could have married him, and if it could have gone that way, it would be a very different life. And I put him over there. And if he had loved me, he would have married me then, so I know he doesn't love me. Say, he's the love of my life, and I cannot live without him. Without him, I just don't have the future I want. The obstacle is he doesn't love me, I get him to love me, and I put in the right substitution. The propellers start to spin. I start to see and feel and experience the him that I can't have. And in this moment, because the writer wrote it, I find myself involved in an event that I can't get out of because I've agreed to agree upon the event. As I speak, whether you like it or not, there is no such thing as a pretend mock. The moment you get started, it's true. Only fake acting where you're once separated, pretending to be, is pretend. But the moment you take an action against anything, if I tell you right now, I don't know, make up something stupid like, you're ugly. I just got him to answer back. He went like this. There's no such thing as a pretend mock, but if we were doing a scene together and I was a typical Hollywood actor and I have to say you're ugly, I wouldn't want my co-star to think I thought he was ugly, so I'd be like, I think you're ugly. Do you understand? So he would be like, me too. You have to actually be willing to risk standing up and being accounted for. And that substitution of that distinction is causing that. You don't only use substitution for the who am I. You use substitution for everything you're talking about and speaking about as well. If you've been raped and you're doing a scene about rape, you're going to need a lot less substitution than if you're doing a scene about rape and you've never been raped. You're going to have to use applicable analogies to the parable of your own history that bring up the common defense and offense mechanisms of the human behavioral emotions and human emotional behaviors directly related to the event that you're in. And through that, your blood starts to boil, your memories start to come up. Don't you ever you're driving down some street and you remember, oh wow, I remember when I used to live there, or someone kissed me there, or I was walking down the street, or I lost my dog here, and you're right back there? It's 30 years ago, you're driving down a street, your dog's been dead for 20 years, it has nothing to do with anything going on. 5 seconds earlier, you were smiling. One thought, and you're in. That's using substitution as a channel to stand at the doorway of the exit of the totality of now and bridge into 30 years ago and bring those two together as a plug and an outlet would come, and the bridge goes up and two become one, and there is here, and you are crying as though it's happening right now. And it's a thought you had randomly on a street you drove down randomly from a smell you had or a sight you had or a sound you remembered, and that dog might as well be dying in front of you again right now. That happens to you organically all the time in a habited response mechanism to the creation of who am I, of human behavior. We're just taking it and using it on purpose. We're not making up an interesting call to arms. We're actually doing nature. So we have stakes, obstacle, through line, subtext, which comes out of, I can't say what I mean because of how much I love him. Substitution, which we use if we can't bring up the visceral response to what the writer wrote. Now you get the who am I. The who am I is something pretty much for the most part you're going to learn to use to stop acting what you think. Put your who am I up on the backboard, look at that who am I and understand, I'm a doctor, I have 3 kids, I'm going through a divorce, I have a stethoscope and a pager and a secretary and a hospital. These are things I have. I'm going to begin to use them as covers, as doings, to get what I want, to get into where I need to go and out of where I need to go. And the more professional you are in our cultural phenomenon, and the more in authority you are, the more you use your profession. Teachers love to do that, right? What if I taught like this? Do you understand? You're using who you are. And how many teachers have you known like that? Which means they're not even there. They're just throwing themselves forward in an understanded idea of a cover in order to get you to listen to the authority that they are so that they don't have to play forward. Or worse, they truly feel like imposters shriveled up in the cave of the life they live in. And they send forward who they think they need to be. That they'll use who they are to get what they need, instead of using who they are to offer selfless service. And that who am I is something that you get to see who you are in order to create an opportunity out of it, not to act, I am a prostitute. Prostitutes come out of little boys and girls who are mistreated at the home and mistake their bodies for their value systems and their bodies for how to get out of harm's way. They then have to leave the home because the harm is too great. They take it on the road, and what's the only commodity that they have to pay their rent with and to eat with? Their bodies. But when they're out in public, they look around just like you see in some of those old movies where the outed person looks through the window of their kid's home and sees them having Christmas morning and everyone's happy, and they can't get in. They've been disbarred from the family. They have nothing to do with that family anymore. And you actually watch a window pane as P-A-I-N instead of P-A-N-E. Oh boy, there's so many letters in the alphabet. You actually see the pain of someone not being able to get through a glass window. And it all comes out of what you think. A prostitute is not someone who walks around like this and acts like they, and sticks their boobs out. A prostitute is someone who feels outside of the culture, that wasn't raised like you, that wishes they could have been as lucky as you, who looks over there to see what they wish they could have, and then they make up and pretend that they're better than they are so that you'll let them fit in. And the more you put them down and single them out, the more they have to pretend to be normal, which is the more that makes them look worse. And the only value that they have as a human being is their sexuality. So they accentuate their sexuality so that you'll like them because they were trained pre-verbally that that's who they are. And our community separates them as though there's something wrong with them. And then you play them on TV in your opinion. That kind of who am I must stop. It's not acceptable anymore to do that. We have left the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and it's time to stand as all as one. We are all brothers and sisters raised and treated differently and yet the same. And it's time to hold each other up instead of knock each other down. Who am I is no longer something that you can afford to pretend to be as a shield to not have to be who you are. If you're going to choose to play a character, it means that you're willing to stand in the character's fears and losses and truths and needs and desires and movements. And you have to borrow your own history to make their souls stand up.